Story 1. When my mother died in 2016, I was the one who started cleaning out her tiny apartment. There was some chicken, frozen vegetables, and pot stickers in her freezer, so I thawed the chicken and then cooked everything along with some rice. I sat at the same kitchen table we had from the early 1970s and just cried while I tried to eat the meal. It was very depressing. Story 2. The meal I was eating when I got the call that my father passed away. I still can't eat it. But the saddest meal? Just bread. Story 3. I honestly do not remember. I know it was the night that my twin brother and I found our mom dead in her apartment. We went to Denny's afterwards since we had not eaten since lunch. We made jokes about ordering bacon sundaes. We tried to figure out how to tell my son that his favorite grandmother had died, what to do with her cats and her parrot, and whether she had left a will. I just do not remember what we ate. I know it could not have been much. Story 4. I was admitted to a mental hospital 1 or 2 days before my birthday some years ago. When my birthday came, they gave me some cheesecake at lunch or dinner. I was still an emotional wreck, so I vividly remember crying while trying to eat my cheesecake. Happy birthday to me. Story 5. So my ex-boyfriend at the time threw a Pop-Tart at me for dinner while he had Texas Roadhouse. He said I needed to lose weight and that it was expensive. Story 6. First Christmas without my grandparents. Grandma always cooked the main dishes and baked goods. Grandpa always led the prayer. I am not very religious, but I loved his love for God. Grandpa died on Grandma's birthday. She died almost a month later. After they passed away, our large family of over 40 cousins never got together again. It has been almost 4 years. Story 7. Probably the one at International House of Pancakes after my sister tried to kill herself. We had some time before we went to visit her again, and I think my dad felt guilty because she blamed him in the suicide note. I remember him trying to get the words out to explain why he struggles with empathy, but it did not get very far. Then we ate awkwardly and never spoke about it again. Story 8. Passing a box of croutons between my brothers and me in the back seat of the car, while Mom cried and drove around town, looking for Dad. That was dinner, and that was all we had that night. Story 9. Water. There was a time when I had nothing to eat for 2 weeks, so I kept a gallon of water in the refrigerator to fill my stomach when it hurt. Story 10. When I cooked the last chicken and rice for my family one night, knowing well that I had no money left after being laid off during the coronavirus pandemic and that no one was hiring an experienced welder, my savings dried up quickly. I was doing Uber and DoorDash as much as I could, but that all went to bills and feeding my daughters. I went days without eating. Story 11. I was accepted into my dream school after being waitlisted and flew across the country last minute without having a place to live yet, so I could start the semester on time. The day after I landed in this new city, my sister took her own life. I received a panicked call from her husband and, amidst my shock, had to call my parents and her best friend to let them know. It had not really hit me yet despite saying the words over and over again. Hours went by, and I began to get a terrible headache. I realized I had not eaten anything all day. The only place within walking distance was a Panera Bread. I had only been to Panera Bread once before. In the middle of eating some soup, I realized that one time had been with my sister the last time I saw her a couple of years earlier. I lost it and cried uncontrollably into my soup. No one asked if I was okay. I felt so alone and just wished someone would give me a hug. Story 12. I turned down a meal a loved one offered me, and they unexpectedly died before I had a chance to have another meal with them. I do not know if that counts, but I will regret it forever. Story 13. Spending hours at the emergency room with my grandfather the night he passed away. We went through Arby's on the way home. I don't remember what I ate, but I remember not being able to taste it. Story 14. Father's Day 2012. I received a call that morning that my brother had committed suicide. My husband and his mother still wanted to go out and celebrate Father's Day. I sat there as they and the children had their pizza because, of course, I had to go. Story 15. I have lived in the same city my whole life. Mom, Dad, sister, and I. Because my dad was an alcoholic and ran my parents' business into the ground, We had to move to a less desirable area right before I graduated high school, by about a month. I was ready to finish high school but had to attend a new school for a short time. We had no friends there, and my dad's drinking had driven away all family. About a week before moving day, my dad was slapped with another DUI. On moving day, he was having a fit. Was it because we lost our house? No. Because he ruined the business? No. Because he wanted to drive the moving truck but couldn't. We loaded the trucks. I drove one and my mom drove the other. Then we started driving. I had never seen the new house, the street, or the city. It was my first time there. And it was a dump. A fixer-upper, as they say. But still a dump. To this day, my mom will say it has good bones. But it's a dump. We unloaded into the house, then drove back for the second load and unloaded again. For the entire trip, I was stuck with my dad in the truck because even though he couldn't drive the truck, he was over 25, and I needed to be supervised by him to drive it, per the rental company's policy. After finishing the second load, we had to drive back to return the trucks and then drive our cars over. My dad stayed because he had work the next day and needed to sleep. On the way back, Mom stopped at a fast food restaurant and got us some burgers. I was moving boxes and items from the driveway into the house and garage because I wanted everything inside before dark. While I worked, they ate their food. My little sister ate while setting up her room. Mom ate while getting something set up. My dad woke up and ate his. Then he ate mine because he was hungry and said there wasn't any food in the house. I came in looking for my food and found an empty bag. I asked around. He said he was hungry and offered me the rest. A quarter of a cold cheeseburger and a few French fries. By this point, we had been moving for about 14 hours. I was very hungry, and this was all we had. So I ate it and I cried. I hadn't cried all day. From moving from my home to this place, to driving, to comforting the dogs who were freaked out, to dealing with my alcoholic dad complaining about driving the moving truck, I had kept it together. But being treated like that on the first day in this new place after everything was too much. I broke down and cried. It was the saddest I have ever been while eating. I hated that house. I still hate that house. It's a dump. It's rotting away. My mom refuses to move because, even though Dad died a few years later, she is attached to it. It was never fixed up. The problems remain and have worsened. I hate that house. If I could get her out of it, I would light a match myself, call the fire department, and walk away. Story 16. Parents spent all of our food money on drugs and all of our food stamps on useless snacks. So I was hungry after 2 to 3 days of barely eating anything. I asked my dad for about $3 so I could get anything. Cheap fast food, a frozen dinner, a few ramen noodles or anything. And they said, "No, you're not worth it." So I ate stale bread and expired soup that night. Story 17. Pancakes at the International House of Pancakes the morning after being ambushed with a surprise divorce proceeding and being unceremoniously kicked out of my home while preparing Sunday dinner for my children. I was, in every way, a distressed person that morning. Story 18. I had just given birth to my 5th baby, and my husband started a huge fight with me in the hospital. It ended with him throwing his wedding ring at me and storming out of the room, leaving me with our newborn. I was devastated and sobbing. The nurse brought me food, and I sat there crying and eating it. That is the memorable moment I have from my daughter's birth. Story 19. One of many times when nobody would sit with me in the school cafeteria, but I could hear people making fun of me. Story 20. Rice and onions were disappointing. I was very broke for a while about 10 years ago. The sushi we ordered the night after my miscarriage was quite sad. I wanted to have at least something nice, but it was just depressing. Story 21. My 30th birthday. Totally alone. No friends or family called. Nobody remembered. Not even my parents. I think I got a card from them some days afterward at least. I made myself a brownie in a mug in the microwave, but it burned. I drank a bottle of champagne and ate it anyway. Story 22. I don't have a good answer, but my grandmother has a powerful one. My grandmother and her sister were very close. Her sister was very sick and dying from cancer. One day, my grandmother decided to cheer her up by making her sister's favorite meal, one of their mother's family recipes. Just as she was finishing, she received the call that her sister had passed. She was so upset that she couldn't eat and ended up throwing the food away. My grandmother never wastes anything, so this was very out of character. Although my grandmother knew her sister was dying, the passing came suddenly and surprised everyone. She has told this story for about 20 years, but it still makes her cry every time. It affects me as well because I remember seeing my grandmother in a different light. Instead of just my grandmother, I saw her as a younger sister who had just lost her oldest and closest friend. Cancer is devastating. Story 23. Fish fingers, potatoes, and peas. I was a child, and my father was in an absolutely foul mood. He and my mother had been arguing all day, and everyone was being shouted at. I didn't want to eat, so he pushed my face into the food like a dog. I still wouldn't eat, so he threw the plate at the wall. I had to pick it all up off the floor and eat it because I knew I had no choice. The feeling of absolute fear and helplessness has stayed with me my entire life. Story 24. The one I just ate. I am a vegetarian. I went to a convention. Normally, this convention has catering options listed on the ticket where you can specify 2 different meat options or a vegetarian option. Then they prepare that many meals. This time, they did not do that. They just brought all 950 people chicken dinners. I refused the plate and asked for a vegetarian one, and they had to cook it separately. Took more than 20 minutes. The final result was a single mushroom with a small pile of onions and peppers, one sad little broccoli spear, and a tablespoon of chopped zucchini. I paid $100 for this. Okay, I have probably had sadder meals. But when I was poor, I saw nothing odd about eating an 11-cent ramen packet and a hunk of Velveeta. Story 25. 5th grade lunch. My mother was mentally ill and never cooked or bought much food except cat food. For about 3 months, school lunch was a paper bag containing a tin of sardines and a small can of pineapple juice. I still cannot get near that food. Story 26. We did not mean to get stuck the way we were. The snowstorm came up quicker than the weather report said it would. 1 minute the trail looked clear, and the next everything was white, howling, and closing in. The radio was not working, the supplies were running low, and it got very bad very fast. Bristle stuck with me through all of it right up until the end. When he did not wake up that morning, I sat with him for a long time. I did not want to do what I did, but I was out of options. It was the worst thing I have ever had to do. I will be forever thankful for the extra boost of energy that came from his bones, letting me crawl my way back to civilization. I honestly do not think I would have made it without him. It was not just about staying alive. It was knowing I had to keep going or it all would have meant nothing. People who have never been that cold or that alone will not get it, and that is fine. I do not talk about it much, but sometimes I think he knew. He kept me warm when the fire went out and gave me a chance to get back home. That is just the kind of dog he was. Story 27. Microwaved instant noodles in a cracked bowl at 2 a.m., sitting on the floor of an unfurnished apartment, using a plastic fork because everything else was still in boxes, including my feelings. Story 28. A chicken nugget McDonald's meal I brought into the hospital room for my mom. She has stage 4 pancreatic cancer, so she was never hungry anymore. For some reason, I thought it might be easier for her to eat them. Story 29. Jameson out of the bottle and a half-pack of Marlboro Reds. Watching the lightning flicker and listening to the thunder roll and police sirens on my roof after my ex-wife handed me her wedding ring and left. Story 30. There were 4 of us family members up all night in the waiting room of the emergency room at Stanford Children's Hospital. We were waiting to hear if my son would survive after a firework exploded in his face on July 4, 2023. We took turns going to the cafeteria to get a little food. No one really ate much, but I remember the yogurt, granola, and fruit that I tried to choke down all by myself. Felt like gravel. I can't ever eat that again. Thank God he survived. Story 31. One time I spent over a month so depressed that I did not get out of bed unless absolutely necessary. When I was so hungry that I could not take it anymore, I would eat a bowl of oats soaked in cold water. I did not eat anything else for over a month and lost weight to the point of organ damage. Story 32. Stranded on an island on the lake as a teenager. At my aunt's cabin, she took the canoe to town that morning. As dusk fell, I was down at the shore desperately waiting. I was crying, walking back up the trail in the dark. The only thing left to eat was a can of beans and a can of corn. A decent mix. Story 33. During my mental health episode 7 years ago, I lived in a long, skinny townhouse. Lying on the couch one night, knowing I had to eat but not being able to bear the distance between me and the refrigerator, I ordered delivery because the front door was closer. Story 34. I was struggling hard in college, had no money, barely affording rent, feeling exhausted and unclean, and failing at the same time. I ate someone's sandwich from the fridge in the common room in the art building. I didn't know whose it was or how long it had been there. It was leftovers and had several bites taken out of it, like a cold panini with pickle juice on it. That was almost as low as I have ever felt. Story 35. My dad left my mom when I was 13. She knew I liked chunky split pea and ham soup, so she bought a case of it, told me that was dinner for the month, and retired to her room. I ate that soup for weeks, and it was decades before I could eat peas or ham again. I feel nauseous thinking of that soup again for the first time in years. Story 36. A spaghetti dinner I was forced to eat on the floor while my family sat at the table and ate their meals. It was a punishment for something I had done wrong, which was just about everything I did. They looked down on me with degradation. It was the most degrading meal I have ever had to suffer through. Story 37. My mom made chicken shish kebabs for my little sister's 16th birthday. However, she was very intoxicated and served them raw. I had to quickly take the kebabs from the people she served and cook them thoroughly. It was a surreal nightmare. Story 38. My time to shine. When I was about 2 and my older sister was 4, we were left at home alone with our dad. When my mom returned home, she found us eating ketchup and vinegar packets because we were starving. The story has always been that he was watching football and did not feed us all day. But I think there may be more to it that I am missing. This was told as a silly story at every holiday and family gathering. Only when I was an adult did I realize how wrong it was. Story 39. I survived a stroke when I was 34. I was traveling for work and was out of state when it happened. After having an MRI and being assessed, I was admitted to the stroke ward and basically slept for a few days. Eventually, I mostly had my wits about me, enough at least to order food that sounded good. French toast was on the available foods list and sounded amazing. I placed an order, and a few hours later, it was delivered. I had forgotten I was in the stroke ward, and all food delivered to me was essentially pureed. The toast was the consistency of a wet, old sponge. You know, the kind mom keeps around for too long because she doesn't want to replace it just yet. I hadn't eaten in a few days after surviving a traumatic brain injury, and the first opportunity one got to eat was some pureed food that was hardly appetizing. Oof. Story 40. The bacon roll and scorched coffee on Woking Station as I traveled to meet my brother, having heard my mother had died before I could reach her to say goodbye. Story 41. Parents were not very good with feelings and were very strict. One school day morning at breakfast, when I was about 12, they told me they would divorce and were not sure who would get custody. I was sobbing and crying but still had to finish my plate. Story 42. Christmas dinner when my mom asked me if I knew her dad. She had dementia, but that was the first time she did not know me. Story 43. I was eating ravioli. My mom let the dog outside to use the bathroom at the same time my grandmother was leaving. The dog got out, was hit, and my mom was holding the dog's bloody body. It was the day before Valentine's Day, and I was sad the next day as well. Story 44. The Sunday family lunch. We received a call. My uncle had committed suicide, driving straight into a wall at full speed minutes before. None of us ate any of the meal that day. The song on the radio was Nothing Else Matters by Metallica. The song still playing on his car radio, connected to Bluetooth, was Nothing Else Matters by Metallica. Scarred me for life. Story 45. Everyone, after burying a family member, my family refused to fully mourn because the resurrection is right around the corner. Life goes back to normal a day or so later because Jehovah remembers his faithful. Still processing so many funerals and losses. Story 46. The last meal with my chihuahua who was dying from kidney failure. We had some medicine we could give her to help trigger hunger signals so she could have her favorite breakfast one last time. It barely worked. I was heartbroken. Story 47. 2 years ago, I had erectile dysfunction and was not eating much. The saddest meal I had consisted of water, air, and sometimes crackers with peanut butter. Story 48. Feeling very nauseated. I sat in my family home trying to eat toast with grape jam before leaving to attend my twin sister's funeral. Story 49. When I was really poor, I used to go to sleep very early, well before dinner time, so that meal was sleep. Story 50. My brother-in-law was hit by a train and died. It was his fault. I picked up chicken on the way home from college so the family would have something to eat. Story 51. Ketchup mixed with warm tap water to make a soup that I obtained from a McDonald's condiment counter when I was homeless. Story 52. I've had several experiences, but one that stands out is when my brother and I were on welfare and no one was hiring. It had been roughly 3 days since we had eaten, so I swallowed my pride and called my grandparents to see if they had $10 so I could go to the dollar store and get a couple of things. They told me they had no money, which is understandable. If they didn't have it, they didn't have it. Later that night, I found out that after I called, they took their friend and her 2 kids to McDonald's for a meal and ice cream, which my grandparents happily paid for because they always put them first over everyone else. They are not related in any way. My grandparents just liked them more. So that night and for 2 days afterward, I survived on sleep and tears. It was one thing always feeling like a failure because you could hardly take care of your needs, but then to be brushed off like that by family honestly messes with your psyche quite a bit. Story 53. When I was in graduate school, I was so poor that I would make Campbell's tomato soup using 2 cans of water instead of 1, so I could stretch it into more meals. Story 54. The series of his favorite meals I made for my father to try to get him to eat something. He had terminal pancreatic cancer and no appetite. It was pretty fruitless, but I persisted until he was too exhausted to eat anything at all. Story 55. My mom was dying in memory care. I have family, friends, a husband, and sons, most of them an hour or less away, but I was alone there. I let them all know, but they didn't come, not even to bring me something to eat. So I left for a few minutes and went to a very good local drive-in and got a burger and a chocolate malt with extra chocolate and extra malt. I brought it back and ate it while I was alone there with my mom. It should have tasted good. Story 56. The day after my grandfather died, I took a personal day and aimlessly drove around to keep my mind busy and focused on something other than the sadness. I ended up in downtown Los Angeles and stopped at one of my favorite restaurants for lunch. I ordered my usual but did not enjoy it at all. I just sat in the booth and sobbed while eating. That was in 2018, and I have not been able to bring myself to go there again since that day. Story 57. I was very hungry and had no money and nothing in the kitchen but some flour, salt, and half a can of Hunt's pasta sauce in the fridge. I figured out how to make some tortillas and dip them in the sauce. I was in the middle of a breakup with someone I still shared an apartment with. Even though I had gotten myself into the sad situation where I didn't have food, I still offered a plate to my ex, a plate of homemade tortillas and some canned sauce. This is something I look back on and feel good about. I don't care if I hate you and you hate me. If you're hungry, I will feed you. Sad because I wish more people were like this. Story 58. Freezer-burned green beans and elbow macaroni were boiled with nothing added. No butter, no salt. That was the last of the food in the house until Mom got paid again. Story 59. I don't normally comment on posts in this subreddit, but here goes. The saddest meal I have had in a long time was one of the first ones I had in the flat I live in now. My wife and I had separated and were starting divorce proceedings. It's easy to push out the darkness and lonely thoughts until you have a space to reflect on them, with not much to distract you. No dog, no children, just me alone in a flat. Self-reflection and no company. That's pretty somber. Story 60. Almost every meal I had right after my father passed away was from McDonald's, especially when I visited my mother. When I was younger and broke, I spent a few days just eating plain rice. Story 61. Had a hard time in life. I had a can of corn for my only meal of the day at work. While there, I realized I needed a can opener, so I just sat and looked at the corn. Story 62. All I had was a packet of instant mashed potatoes and a can of baby carrots. So I made myself a bowl of carrot-flavored instant mashed potatoes. Story 63. When I was a nursing student in the United Kingdom, I was broke the entire time. Homesick for Ireland where my family was, I had my 2 cats and was living in a small studio apartment. I was living off stolen sandwiches from the National Health Service for lunch and dinner. I usually took one home with me for dinner, but there was none available that day. I got home from my shift to 2 starving cats and was starving myself. The only thing I had in the fridge was some eggs from God knows when. With no money for cat food, I scrambled the eggs, and the cats and I ate scrambled eggs for dinner. It was so depressing I just cried and felt so bad for the cats too. We are great now, and the cats are chubby, warm, and delighted with life. Story 64. The night my abusive ex-girlfriend manipulated my daughter into making false allegations of sexual assault against me. I remember every bite felt like eating lead and my stomach was in knots. I managed 3 mouthfuls before vomiting. Thankfully, after a voluntary police interview and with the help of a very good but expensive solicitor, the case did not proceed due to severe inconsistencies in my daughter's story. Story 65. I made fish, chips, and peas for dinner, but my partner did not come home, so it went cold. He never came home because, unbeknownst to me, he was already dead. By the next morning, I knew, and as I was 3 months pregnant, I forced myself, between sobs, to eat a crumpet for breakfast. That evening, my mother made roast chicken for about 10 people who had gathered in our shared grief. It was the saddest dinner around our usually happy family dining table. Story 66. The meal after my mom went to jail. Our whole family left the courthouse and went home to have a family dinner to support each other as we promised her we would. We saw her taken away in handcuffs and then ordered pizza. We all sat together with no idea what was going on. We couldn't call her and didn't know where she was going or what she was doing at the time. We had her phone and just sat there staring at it whenever someone called or messaged. It was so surreal. Story 67. Probably the time I got kicked out of my mother's house by my stepfather because I was there when my mother had a stroke and he blamed me for it. It was raining, I had nowhere to go, and had barely any money. I bought a small pizza from the pizza place near me and walked about 4 miles to a park where I used to frequently meet a friend before he moved away. I was crying while eating, sitting down at a small pavilion that served as a children's changing room for sporting events organized by the local council and schools. I was huddled against a wall, exposed to wind and rain from 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. That was probably the saddest meal I have ever had. Story 68. Parents both on medication. For children, 2 adults living in a 1-bedroom house. Beans and rice. The day before, we had rice and beans. I was 12, listening to my 2 younger siblings cry while my father fell asleep at the table. Story 69. My grandmother tells this story every Christmas, and it always breaks my heart. She grew up poor, but every year her parents would take her and her little sister out for a hamburger dinner on Christmas. One year, when she was about 9 and her little sister 7, her parents stayed in the car and told them they were big girls now and could go in and eat their hamburger by themselves. It wasn't until years later that she realized her parents couldn't afford to feed all 4 of them that year. Story 70. The mango salsa my dad made the day before he had a brain aneurysm was in the fridge for about 12 hours. I ate it while crying. It was both the best and the worst experience at the same time, knowing it was one of the last things he had made that I could still experience. Story 71. My high school teacher for food and nutrition required us, as part of our grade, to make a full meal for our families and document it. I made a big dinner for everyone. It was chicken pasta and some dessert. Everyone said they were not hungry, so I ate by myself and lied in my project, saying everyone loved it. Story 72. I told my husband I used to eat diet lemonade powder as a snack when I was a child because we did not have anything else. His expression made me realize how incredibly depressing that was. Story 73. I was leaving that morning for school at the other end of the country. My mother made me a huge breakfast: pancakes, syrup, strawberries, whipped cream, and a loaded omelet. I was already nervous and had butterflies in my stomach about moving away. There was no way I could eat all of that without getting sick and throwing up. I had to leave 80% of it uneaten, and I did not think to put it in a container to bring along. Story 74. The meal I had before I lost my unborn twin babies. It is unfortunately my favorite dish, but I cannot get it down my throat anymore. Story 75. Bringing my wife some fish and chips from the hospital restaurant the day she had a very late miscarriage. It was not very nice, but they were closing and it was all they had left. I could not bear to leave her alone for too long in that tiny, bright room. We nearly lost her too that day. Story 76. During COVID-19, I was working 13 to 14-hour days, 6 days a week, due to people catching COVID-19 and having to isolate. After a stretch of 23 days without a day off, I finally had 5 days off in a row to recover. Around midnight on the first day, I realized I had not done any food shopping and didn't have anything in the house to prepare a meal. Because it was midnight during the COVID-19 pandemic, trying to get food delivered was virtually impossible. I ended up eating white rice and a tin of tuna with some soy sauce. It wasn't awful in taste, but it was the saddest meal I had ever eaten. Story 77. A whole boiled chicken. Bagged salad with cut-up pieces of string cheese and chunks of celery to add flavor, served with dressing options of French and an off-brand ranch. To complete the meal, a can of baked beans opened, with a spoon left in the can, not warmed up or poured into a bowl. Story 78. Back in college, a guy I was dating took me to the beach at night and brought out some of the best marijuana I had ever had. We passed the joint back and forth sitting on the lifeguard platform, and inevitably, I got the munchies. The only food we had with us was a single piece of double mint gum, and we were too high to drive to get anything else. Story 79. A couple of years ago, my dad decided to do something different for Christmas dinner. Just the two of us. Lamb chops. He cooks a lot and has made it before, and I remember it being good, but it had been a really long time, so we had to look up recipes. A lot of effort was put in, but it was absolutely awful. I tried hard to enjoy it, but it just wasn't cooked enough for something. Rare, chewy, weird. I usually like medium rare steak, but this was not good and gamey. For whatever reason, the side dishes didn't turn out as we had hoped, so there was really nothing redeeming. We just chewed slowly for a while in depressed silence. Afterward, we agreed to turn it into some kind of lamb stew, but no, we ended up throwing it all away. It was depressing for multiple reasons. Partly because I think eating young lamb is kind of sad, so I was really hoping it would be special and worth it in some way. Then to just throw it away, I literally cried a little bit later. On top of that, the whole thing reminded me how old my dad is getting, how little time he has left, and how things he used to love, like cooking, he's getting worse at. Story 80. Eating cold hot dogs and washing them down with Jameson whiskey with a group of addicted individuals, of which I was one at the time. Story 81. After my dad's visitation and funeral, we had been at the funeral home all day and well into the evening, saying hi and thanking everyone for coming. Took forever and felt even longer. We finally left at 10 p.m., but most places were closed, and I did not have the energy to cook, so we went to a bar and ordered a basket of chicken tenders. Needed to eat. Sad because of the circumstances, obviously, but also just a poor excuse for dinner. Story 82. The first lunch I had after my ex dumped me. We used to have lunch together every day because we were co-workers. I was so terrified to leave my office in case I ran into him that I ate a pack of expired crackers with 2 packets of Splenda on top. I cried the whole time behind my computer. Story 83. When I was a child, my family rented a place that was a club my grandfather belonged to. It was a pole building in the middle of nowhere. Everyone who attended the funeral service received all-you-can-eat pancakes. The same thing happened when my grandmother died. Story 84. I got a king-size pot noodle once, and it had no noodles in it. I would say I was more disheartened than sad. Story 85. The slice of pizza I had to steal from the work refrigerator was all I was going to eat for a few days. Story 86. My infant son was in the pediatric intensive care unit at a children's hospital. He had undergone a procedure that day that did not go well. My spouse, mother, and I went out to eat at P.F. Chang's. We were all so despondent that we barely spoke. Story 87. Christmas Eve of 2002. The girl I had just started seeing 6 weeks before decided she did not want to see me anymore. My extended family, who usually came into town, all had something come up and could not make it. My brother and his wife were on the other side of the country celebrating Christmas during a vacation. I left my small apartment and went one town over to my grandparents' house, where all of my extended family were supposed to stay. They were tired and fell asleep fairly soon. I spent the evening mostly by myself in their living room. At 11:30 that night, I decided to eat something. There was not much in their house. I found some macaroni and cheese, made it, took the pot into the living room with me, and ate a sad, lonely late-night dinner as the clock struck midnight. Merry Christmas. Story 88. I grabbed a handful of those 2-pack saltine crackers with butter from the condiment bar at the grocery store. I couldn't even afford instant noodles. Story 89. Whatever they served me as a breakfast sandwich at 6 a.m. in a county lockup in rural Georgia after being arrested, and after sleeping on a concrete floor for a few hours, I tried to eat it while realizing I had totaled my car and wondering if my brother survived the accident. Story 90. I had stumbled out of the woods after the 3rd or 4th search pass looking for a toddler. It was the first day that temperatures were below freezing. No one wanted to call it a recovery yet, but that is what it was. They served fettuccine alfredo, about 2 degrees above freezing. Story 91. This lasagna is from a hospital cafeteria. I offered some to my older brother who was battling an illness. He said no, of course, because I was the youngest and I was hungry. It was probably the last meal I had with my brother. Story 92. My brother and I moved out of our parents' house together to an apartment in November of that year. My mother, who had been ill, was taken to the hospital by my father. A couple of days later, he called us to say they were rushing Mom into emergency heart surgery. My brother and I went to the hospital and arrived while she was in surgery. Unfortunately, she did not survive. This was the day after my birthday, which nobody celebrated, of course, with Mom being in the hospital. The next day was Thanksgiving. Dad insisted I still prepare the full meal at the apartment, and then the 3 of us just sat there. Story 93. I was 18, and my father took me to my favorite Mexican restaurant. He gave me $100 and told me he was leaving my disabled, heartbroken mother. The restaurant was torn down not long after that, and that was the last time I ate there. Story 94. A melted Snickers bar that a construction worker gave me while I was crying at a red light. I was hungry but did not have the capacity to prepare anything. Story 95. Hospital cafeteria lunch. Maybe it was roast chicken and vegetables with stuffing. I can't fully remember. I just remember us crying in the cafeteria during our meal. We hadn't eaten in over 12 hours. I was 5 days postpartum, and my husband urged me to eat something. This was immediately after finding out our infant son had to undergo emergency surgery, developed sepsis afterward, and might not survive. Story 96. Eating a small takeaway meal in a hospital cafeteria while waiting to see how our son's surgery had gone. He dove into shallow water and broke his neck. The waiting was the most heart-wrenching time I have ever had. I am not sure if 5 minutes felt like 5 hours or 5 seconds. Story 97. Kraft instant macaroni. I've made regular macaroni hundreds of times. Something about moving away and having to microwave it with nothing else hurt. Ramen, etc. hasn't been the same. Story 98. I had an uncle who was murdered. The night of the murder, my entire family had been trying to contact him for several hours but was unable to. The police reported a murder, and the victim appeared to match his description. I remember eating something while waiting for some family members who went out to check on the body. Story 99. I was alone in my room on my 16th birthday, while both my parents were arguing about who should do something for my birthday. Story 100. A corn dog and a 22-ounce bottle of Mickey's. Bought with change I scrounged up around my shared apartment. I questioned my life choices and made changes. Story 101. In April, I got very sick with strep throat, the flu, and an ear infection. I was performing a lot in my high school's biggest concert of the year. I play 3 instruments and had 2 major vocal solos. I had scheduled many music classes, so I was very busy, but I was so sick that I couldn't eat any food, so I wasn't getting better because my body didn't have any nutrients. My mom decided to make me some chicken and noodles with broccoli. Normally, this would sound really good, like chicken Alfredo. However, all she did was boil the pasta without salt, grilled the chicken with no seasoning, and used leftover broccoli for some vitamins. If the broccoli wasn't in it, the meal would have been only one color. Story 102. Thanksgiving, my senior year of high school. Dinner was almost ready, and my immediate family was starting to gather in the living room and kitchen when my mother's boyfriend at the time had a heart attack. Paramedics arrived, and my mom went with them to the hospital. He passed away. My 3 siblings and I had to clean up the mess left by the paramedics, and my older sister insisted we try to have dinner. I don't remember actually eating anything except some ambrosia salad my mom only made for Thanksgiving. The man's heart attack was inevitable. He ate a lot, sat a lot, and his idea of budgeting was making sure there was a case of beer and Coca-Cola in the fridge. The timing, however, ruined Thanksgiving for several years afterward. Story 103. I was living with one of my friends, and on my birthday one year, we got into a huge shouting match in our apartment that ended with her stomping out and taking the car. Since we shared the car, I couldn't go for a drive like I normally would in that situation, so I showered and went to bed. I woke up the next day and she still wasn't back. So I tried to cheer myself up by eating a cupcake I made. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried while I ate it. Story 104. After my best friend died, I went to a restaurant we used to eat at a lot. I ordered an extra empty plate and glass, ate, and thought about them. Story 105. I guess I have 2. We met at a new restaurant for my birthday. Everyone received their food on time, but mine didn't come. I am sure it was because I am allergic to onions and someone put onions on my dish, so they had to cook it again. My family all got their food and ate. I waited. The staff started putting chairs up and closed the wall door. I waited. I finally got my food but felt terrible. They never came out to explain or apologize, and honestly, I should have received that late meal for free. Story 106. My mom was taking care of my grandmother in the hospital, who had been bleeding excessively on my mom's birthday. My mom received beer and potato chips for her birthday. I had to undergo surgery the day before my birthday. My birthday dinner was an intravenous solution. Apparently, I win the award for the worst birthday dinners. Yes, we laugh about who won. We also make sure to have much better dinners for our birthdays according to our preferences. Our preferences are basically anything better than beer and potato chips. This experience has made us all very appreciative of anything we receive. Not that we were not appreciative before, but this has led to a whole new level. No one has beaten me in horrible birthday dinners. Story 107. McDonald's. My grandfather had just passed away in May of this year unexpectedly. He had been sick for a while, but the way he passed was not expected. I picked at my food because I still felt very sick. Story 108. Most of my meals during chemotherapy for 6 months tasted gray. Even now, on immunotherapy, it is still hit or miss if I will have functioning taste. Story 109. 1 egg and multiple bottles of water to feel full. Back then, my parents were struggling financially and could not afford a full meal. Story 110. It seems like in my family, when people pass away, my dad orders Kentucky Fried Chicken. I remember this with my grandpa, my grandma, and my mom last October. I wasn't even hungry when I lost my mom last October. Story 111. Christmas 2020. I had gone out of town for a few days with the intention of returning home for Christmas Eve, but a blizzard forced me to spend a couple of extra days on vacation. The town had 1,300 people and was closed up tight on Christmas Eve afternoon. Christmas dinner was a box of soggy macaroni noodles I cooked in a crock pot. Story 112. Snowed in alone on Thanksgiving with 4 small slices of inexpensive deli turkey and a bottle of cranberry vodka. Story 113. My tears and mucus flowed after my grandmother died. I had a full, intense cry. I had been by her side for 12 to 16 hours straight. I had my last conversation with her. I watched as she slipped out of consciousness into blankness. I held her the entire time, even until she took her last breath. I do not know when my next meal was or even the last one before her passing. Story 114. Christmas after I got out of the army, I made the mistake of staying in Alaska for a girl in an empty apartment with a sleeping pad and one chair. I bought tuna, noodles, and mayonnaise from the gas station up the street. I opened the tuna with a knife, boiled the noodles in a popcorn tin because I had no pots or pans, and made tuna noodle salad for my Christmas dinner. Story 115. The mourner's meal after each of my grandparents' funerals. In my culture, we have a ceremonial meal after we bury someone which symbolizes our last meal with them. Story 116. I was in the middle of shallow frying crumbed calamari at my parents' house. They were interstate when my sisters came over to tell me that Dad had had a stroke and was being airlifted to the hospital. I had to keep cooking or chose to keep cooking, who really knows which it was. It was hard to see through the tears. That was the start of the very quick and harsh downhill slide. Story 117. I had only a cinnamon roll for dinner and nothing else on Thanksgiving one year. I do not think I ate anything else that day either. Story 118. Just the other day, another working day when I couldn't spare the time to go out for lunch because the 100 tasks ahead were overwhelming. Another day of eating in front of the laptop while working. So I made a cup of ramen and ate while working, and tears just flowed while eating, thinking how miserable and tired I was. Story 119. When my brother was in surgery for a liver transplant, we went to the cafeteria and the main meal of the day was liver. Story 120. Sausages in a jar. I was hungover once and absolutely famished. I ate all of them in the parking lot in my car. This is one of the many reasons why I do not drink anymore. Story 121. Cauliflower with watery cheese sauce. The cauliflower was still hard and the pre-made lasagna was sour. No, I did not make it. I had to force it down. I felt like crying afterward. Story 122. The burger and milkshake I ordered from Beano's were something I did not have money to pay for. I was homeless and hungry, so I ordered something so delicious I thought it would cheer me up, but it only made me feel like even more of a dirtbag when I pretended to go to the washroom and ran out the back door. I still carry the guilt of that today and always make sure that I tip at least 20% whenever I eat out. I tried to pay them back after I got off drugs and got a job, but they were gone. Story 123. I think I was around 6 years old, give or take a year. It was my birthday, and my entire school class was invited. Not a single person showed up, only my family. I remember them trying to make the best of it and letting me work on a glittery little mermaid puzzle that was one of my presents while eating cold Pizza Hut pizza. I had even worn my favorite colorful plaid skirt. It is nothing compared to other situations, but this makes me want to hug my younger self so much. No kid deserves that. Story 124. The first Christmas dinner after my mother had died. I practically ruined it, which did not help, but we sat and ate in absolute silence. Story 125. When I was a child, we often had nothing to eat. My father was unemployed and an alcoholic. My mother was working, but the income was still not enough. My father's uncle, who was very kind despite being strict, would often give him food or money for our meals. One time, my father came home with some food he said was from his uncle's wife. It was grilled fish, I think. When it was already on the table and we were about to eat, there were worms in it. Probably because it had been sitting in the refrigerator for too long. We still ate the parts that looked okay. I don't know if they noticed it too. I have never shared this with anyone before. I will never forget that. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.